Major support for these programs is provided by Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, All Nation Renovation, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, M&T Bank. Additional support is provided by AVR Realty Company, LLC, Ackman Ziff Real Estate Group, LLC, Bingham McCutcheon, LLP, Briarwood Organization, Capital One Bank, C.B. Richard Ellis, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, Cushman & Wakefield, Dimes Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, DDG Partners, Eastern Consolidated, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Friedman LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Gemini Real Estate Advisors LLC, Genova, Burns and Giantomasi, Grubb and Ellis, Investors Savings Bank, Jack Jaffa and Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Newmark Knight Frank, RAL Development Services, The Spandrel Group, LLC, Siami Development, SJP Properties, Site Comply, Sterling and Sterling, Stephen Napolitano, The Wickoff Group, Urban American.
So what's happening in the office market? Happy days are here again. I mean, this is what it looks like. I'm sitting with these four creative guys, the deans of the office market, and they're telling me the world is so great. So I want them to tell us what's really happening. My guests today include Patrick Murphy, who is the Vice Chairman at C.B. Richard Ellis, Moshe Sekenek, who is the Executive Vice President and Principal at Newmark Knight Frank, Mark Boissy, who is the Chairman of the New York region for Cassidy Turley, and last but not least, the Chairman of Global Brokerage, my good friend who doesn't like leaving this seat, that's why we had to keep it over here, Bruce Mosler. So, Mr. Mosler, we were talking prior to the show when we had you on the show 10 years ago, and we just talked about cycles. You know, we're April, May 2011. How do you see this as compared over the last 10 years?
Well, I think this cycle and this recovery are unlike any other before it. If you look at the S&L crisis, when the market began to improve and employment moved again, it was a recovery that was broadened across the board. I think this recovery is bifurcated. I think it's select. I think the major cities, New York particularly, has done well. When you look at, we've recovered 40% of the jobs lost since the downturn. The rest of the country has only recovered about 14%. So putting this in perspective, New York's done very well. I think we've done well, and I think we've got a very diverse, robust tenant base, much more so than we did in the last downturn. The tech market, education, healthcare,
Wait a second.
financial services.
You know what, you talk about the tech market. I remember I was doing consulting in 1999, 2000 for Deloitte & Touche, and my job was working with the new media, the kids, who I had to show them how to get a suit because once in a while they had to go have a suit for an interview or something. And the world was great. And then in February, they canceled the contract. In February of 2000.
It's because they don't wear suits anymore.
That's right.
No, they
T-shirts and jeans.
No. What
They didn't
happened
need you to teach them.
it was February 2001. They said, hey, we're just discontinuing. We don't need this. We don't need the property in Jersey City. So the tech market has been up and down different cycles because I think the internet before was even stronger. People were going there. Long Island City, they called tech market. I mean, so the world changed.
Yeah, but one last comment on the tech market, and I think Patrick's better sort of positioned to talk about this, but I think Google's acquisition of their asset for $1.8 billion and now sort of their co-headquarters with the West Coast, made a huge statement. And actually, before that, the tech trend was coming to New York. But I think it's now become an East Coast, West Coast. And in terms of aggregate jobs, by the way, there are more people employed in the tech industry in the New York region than in Silicon Valley.
I'm not disagreeing with you because I think you're right, because the companies coming now are taking larger pieces. About a year ago, Mark Boissy's on my show, and we're talking about office space on Park Avenue at numbers I couldn't believe. I think you said to me $50 a foot.
I said $50 a foot for sublease space that was being dumped on
But
the marketplace right after the
but
fiscal
long-term
crisis.
sublease. It wasn't a short-term sublease. Really good space.
These were long-term subleases, yeah.
And now?
Well, the sublease space is faded. And now that the sublease space is faded, pricing has risen a little bit.
I mean, but how much is, Bruce was bringing out the correction. How much is that correction? What was somebody have to pay for a space at 280, 245 Park, 340? What on a good A building, A- building on Park Avenue? What do you have to pay today?
You're all over the lot depending upon where you are in the building. The upper aspects of some buildings are now asking $100 a square foot. For instance, we talked earlier in our conversation that 280 Park, which has just been recapitalized, has increased their rents from mid-80s to triple digits, to $100 a square foot. There's a different cost structure now that there's new ownership in. But, a year ago, you probably could have done a deal there at 75 a foot or maybe less for direct space, not sublease space. So, and in that same building, 3 years ago, I had a lease out with a hedge fund for $135 a square foot. So look what happened. It went from 135 down to the mid-70s, and now we're back up to approaching triple digits. So we're recovering, as you said, Bruce.
Of course.
And you know what scares me? What scares me is that this is sort of a top-down. I'm worried about a possible top-down marketplace where the top end of the market is dragging up the middle end of the market, which has no right to be dragged up.
So what happens? What happens to the middle market tenants?
Well,
not everybody can spend $100. I always tell that story about that small accounting firm or the small nonprofit or that small company who really can't afford that.
And is it sustainable? I mean, to have these middle market buildings up at these higher rents is not really sustainable.
Well, I would say the good news is that you do have the diversity of products. So the tenant that is looking for that A building they're out there. They're doing everything they can now to scramble and find space. And we talked earlier.
A year ago, 2 years ago, scramble. People were begging. Take my space, take my space.
Absolutely, but as Bruce mentioned, times have changed, and they changed quickly. After the crash, landlords in Midtown repriced their product very quickly. Mm-hmm. Three separate times they priced their product downward to get tenants to understand that pricing had gone to the bottom of the 03 market. So essentially, tenants that had the ability to do things could look at the market and say, we're at the bottom. Let me go in and find a good opportunity.
This is an appropriate comment for the man who represents mostly tenants as opposed to landlords. So Moshe, you represent those, the poor, hard-working tenant.
Right.
Well, what's happening? How's the tenant looking at the world today?
My view is a little bit different in that I don't think the market is quite as heady as some of my colleagues here. I think you have the top end of the market that's strengthened more, and I think the more regular product has not strengthened nearly as much. And I think part of the phenomena is post-Lehman, we all saw a time that none of us had ever experienced anything like it. The market was frozen for 9 months, literally frozen. So what happens is when deals started repricing, it may have corrected too much to the downside. Mm-hmm. There was that much fear out there. Now there's this sense of going back up, but we're going back up from what was really an artificially low level. Mm-hmm. So that, I think, explains some of this enthusiasm that it's just sort of thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Are we also a tale of different markets? I mean, the Plaza District is one, Park Avenue is two. I mean, Park Avenue and Park Avenue South are two different neighborhoods completely. Flatiron is 3, Hudson, and then Lower Manhattan. I mean, how's Lower Manhattan? I mean, have you been down there? You forgot.
You know, on occasion, Michael, I appreciate your asking. I do get down there. It's doing fine. But I just want to kind of piggyback off what Moshe said. I think there's no question that in the hard correction down, that net effectives dropped 40, 50%, really closer to 50 than 40. And that was artificially low. What we've seen happen since then is the net effectives have improved dramatically. We're back to normalized work letters. We're back to normalized free rent periods. But I think that the recovery
I
is...
hope some tenants never watch this show because
Well,
you're talking about it's a
no,
landlord
but
show.
look,
But think about it. Tenants have done a very good job of trying to be poised to act.
That's right.
Right? So a lot of major corporations took the time to do their due diligence and think through whether or not they'd be able to take advantage of the market.
and commit long term.
And you see a number of companies that have actually gone out and executed fantastic transactions that give them competitive advantage against the people that they're in business against.
Didn't we say for smaller space, they're becoming more efficient to tenants? They're taking space in a smaller amount of areas?
Yeah. It's clear that one of the things that's going to temper any increase in the market is a lot of tenants are redefining their space standards. So if you have a law firm tenant, they may lease 10% less space. And when you look at the lawyer capacity in the new space, it could easily be 10 or 15 or 20% more. I think it's happening in many industries.
There's
So
no
although-
more need for law libraries. There's no need for data processing on site. I mean, there's a lot of this.
That's
with
all
the cloud
true,
systems.
Michael. That's true. But I want to stay on your comment, Moshe, because I think everyone has gotten more efficient. In other words, the days of living luxuriously are over. Every corporation that is in the business of trying to find space right now is doing it in a more efficient way. But one fundamental difference I've seen, and maybe this is a debate, is that in 10 anyway, as people were committing to space, and this was just as the market and the economy were beginning to recover, they were cautious. And I think people were trying to find less space, become more efficient, not look for expansion. In 11, I think what's driving this marketplace is a little bit different in the sense that people are looking for growth. We are finally seeing some growth. Corporations are rehiring. Corporations are now looking to grow a bit, particularly in niche market areas. They are strategically making moves. That's added to growth this year.
So I think the accounting firms have historically done the best in terms of
With
space
hotel, with
planning.
hoteling.
Agreed.
Hoteling has been a
No question.
Standards. One of my clients, KPMG, has kind of led, in my opinion, from that perspective, and they have redone their space standards, and they're executing that right now, restacking and trying to
What
get more
percentage have they
people.
gone down in terms of space?
I'd rather not, go into that.
Okay.
But I will tell you this: they're doing it everywhere where we do transactions for them around the country. Interestingly, they don't plan for growth. It's now
that's exactly.
it's butts
They-
in
they-
seats.
Yes.
And they're telling the business units, we're not going to plan in growth because we don't want to have excess
I
capacity.
mean, I remember being at Deloitte 9-10 years ago. A principal had space of basically my chair that I'm sitting with, and basically you bring your computer, you put your
Plug and go.
you plug in the computer, you plug in
Yeah.
your phone, and that was it. I mean, the average
Same thing
space
today.
was 45 square feet. I mean, if they had that much, I mean, law firms are using more efficient space, but they're not as efficient as the accountants. It's like the Yotel on 42nd Street
Yeah.
for a 90 square foot room.
But I think to Patrick's point, there's no business today, in my view, that hasn't professionalized and isn't on balance. You can't ever say none, but on balance, business today has become more professionalized, more efficient about how they take space. This year, I'm seeing for the first time, though, business growing again, where CEOs have made
I've heard
have
this
the
from you, but
confidence
here is my
to
big question.
hire.
I hear of companies, I'm listening to the conversation, but I'm not hearing of any new companies. Google, yes, but Google was here. What new companies are running to New York City? I
don't agree.
haven't
I
heard
don't
that.
agree. I
No,
think-
wait, Mark?
I don't have an answer for that.
I mean,
I don't have an answer for
I
that.
mean,
I do
Patrick,
think-
do we see major companies who were in New Jersey saying, I want to come to New York. They were in Jersey City or Hoboken.
Not from Jersey City, but to Bruce's earlier point, the Google deal, I think, in some respects, is indicative of what we're going to see. If you can't find talent where you normally got it, West Coast,
Right.
or you're overpaying for talent there, and you think the talent wants to be in a 24/7 environment like New York, you're betting that the talent will be there when you come, and I think we're going to see.
Aren't people?
I think we're seeing an
there the
influx
big?
of new tech tenants.
Isn't there the story that downtown Manhattan is a 24/7? I don't see the young people running to downtown Manhattan that I want to be on Stone Street for something.
But the ones that are downtown don't have far
like
to go
it.
to get
Look
to
at
the
Condé Nast.
meatpacking
like it.
district where they're all going.
Okay,
Condé
so
Nast.
wait, you bring up a good point. So Condé Nast,
They want to go downtown, apparently.
Yep.
Condé Nast wants to
change
go
the whole
downtown. It's going
complexion.
to change downtown. But they're going downtown. What's the deal? I mean, look, their lease would be coming up. Well, they're going to get a great savings. They're going to have great incentives over here. This is like right after 9/11 where they were great deals. I mean, let's be realistic. You went into Seven World. You had a great deal with Larry at that time. You know, this wasn't brand new installation.
They're still
great
doing
building.
good deals. Wilmer Hale just signed a great deal downtown for 200,000 feet.
That's right.
I have a
Same
tenant
deal that
looking.
they would do uptown. You know, pick
That's
a
right.
pick a brand new building uptown. They'd be paying 25% more.
You look
They're
at
not
Larry's
downtown.
new buildings downtown. If you're looking for modern generation work product,
Column-free.
safely built buildings, right? You know, an environment where you can,
More efficient.
You can put a lot of people and densify because the HVAC is going to work properly. They've really thought through everything there. Those are beautiful buildings.
So what happens to, let's talk about the buildings downtown, which are not the brand new buildings. I mean, I was downtown last night, and I was walking from the Holocaust
We'll also
Museum
separate
up
east
to,
and west
up. Okay, I'm not talking about Battery Park City. I was walking from Battery Park City up from 1 Broadway up to the Brooklyn Bridge, and I passed these C buildings, which are C buildings because they are 80 years old, they're 90 years old, and they're not efficient. Who's leasing space in those buildings?
Listen, the C buildings are going to remain C buildings. The pricing is not going to change, and the only question is, are they going to be B+ residential or C office? That's the only question.
they'd be
What I do think you're going to see downtown is 5 years from today, there'll be a complete sea change in how downtown is perceived.
I think Mark brings it up with the Condé Nast. There's no question.
As much as Condé Nast is important, to me what's even more important, I had a project with my 15-year-old daughter where she was videotaping Grand Central and explaining the impact on Midtown and what difference does a transportation hub make, and this is the reason Midtown grew. If you stop and ask yourself, where's Midtown's transportation hubs? You have Grand Central, you have Port Authority, you have Penn Station, and downtown you have nothing.
But you're going to have the new.
That's, I think,
gonna
going
have-
to be
that
the
transportation
huge
center
difference.
is going to be a big thing.
That's the difference that makes a difference.
So
and
now
transforms
I'm
downtown.
going to fast forward. Hudson Yards. What's going to happen there? I mean, I walked the other day on 37th Street with the TF Cornerstone in the middle of nowhere. Okay, there's nothing on 10th Avenue. I don't care if you have a subway stop over there. It's going to
get
take
built.
time. Oh, it's
going to get built,
And who's
Michael.
gonna move there?
Because, look, there's a huge trend west to begin with. That's how large tenants have gravitated, because with new building construction and column-free space, tenants have gravitated to the west. You have a developer who has strength. You have a partner with that developer that has financial strength. They have the ability to do one building already.
I'm not
as of
questioning.
right
I'm just
at cost.
bringing up a little contrast.
But here's the reality. There's very little new construction in the city.
Exactly
You just said it. The average stock is 50 years old or greater. So at the end, we have reached almost equilibrium. Midtown, we're at just under 10%.
Who's going to move into Boston's new building? We know one law firm's going to go there.
yeah, that's right.
Is it Moshe, is it going to be another? Is it going to be a law firm building? I
Well,
mean,
they say they've designed the building to cater to law firms. They've made it very efficient so you can actually fit the densities we were talking about before. I would be pretty optimistic that Boston Properties, A, they're being realistic, I think, pricing it these days.
Yes.
And B, it's going to be a great new product. And that always, while it may not appeal to many, the new product aspect is going to appeal to some.
Mark, 510 Madison. What's your thoughts?
It's pretty hot from what I understand. They're doing deals in excess of $100 a square foot. My understanding is that they've got a big deal with SAC for 60,000 feet for the base of the building. They've leased 2 or 3 floors already at between 95 and 100 a foot.
Now, what about
And
Elcor?
It's a great
It's a
product.
great building. What about Elcor's
have you
building,
seen
which
it?
is
Overbuilt.
545?
That's how great it is.
Excuse me?
545, the Elcor building,
Elcor building, yes.
which is
That was a
across the
rehab.
street.
You have
Yeah,
different
rehab.
they,
It's a
rehab.
they've done a
different
couple of
products.
deals. They have activity. It's priced.
It's going to be a
based on-
mid-70s. It's going to be a mid-70s.
Well priced.
And it's a great location. At the end of the
And
day,
it's small floor
Exactly
plates.
right.
It's
Yeah.
really not competitive,
what's
frankly,
happening?
with the 510 Madison.
We were talking about things have gotten better. Can a tenant still get a good work letter, a good amount of free rent? I mean,
the right
Mark, what do you
credit,
see?
the right credit.
Of course they can, but those concessions, as Bruce was saying before, are definitely coming down, and that's why you're seeing the net effective rents go up. Where
There's a window
landlords
now,
were
I
saying,
think.
I'll build your space for you, so they'll go build a $100 a foot installation for you. Now, what's SL Green doing? We're going to cap it at 60 a foot. What is Boston Properties doing? We're going to cap it at 60, 65 a square foot. So they're capping concessions. The free rent is coming down a little bit. Your net effects are going up. So you're seeing a disconnect now in a lot of
That's right, 'cause
situations.
some tenants still want the big work
They
letter
want
and
the big
haven't
work
adjusted.
letter.
Moshe's going to jump in a minute and say that you still get the big work letter or should get it.
But you know what?
But the
Wait a
reality
second.
is there's a window here.
I mean, the Australian fund,
Still.
which happens to be a sovereign wealth fund, just bought 49% of the interest of the Pfizer building on 3rd Avenue.
685.
Okay, 685.
Yep.
So who's going to rent in that building? I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad building. I mean, it's a vacant building. It's a B building.
Watch Pfizer come back and take it again. No, I'm kidding you.
That'll
but-
happen. You know,
No
there.
comment.
I mean, because
gonna be
you know what happened last
professional
year
service.
with Avon moving to 767. The rent was so cheap. I mean, effectively, some of these rents
that
were.
building is, again, in my opinion, in a great location. Blocks from Grand Central. And while every time the buildings come available, everybody's like, who's going to take it? The fact is,
Someone always did.
Yeah.
and if you think about it, when, publishing firms that may not want to go downtown, and Avon, I mean, there are people out there that will look at that building as a gem. So
As a gem?
I think as a gem, yes.
No,
because,
Pat's right.
As a gem.
No, you know why?
because of its location. And
I think location.
And
Flexibility.
I mean, it's
pricing.
great,
Pat,
but
to your
look-
point, this is. First of all, let's put reality on the table. There's 75 blocks of maybe 100,000 feet, of which there's more than 100 tenants looking. So in the supply-demand world, it's things are moving towards the landlord gradually. I want to be sensitive to Moshe's point, but the other point is Pat's point. Here's a block of space that isn't going to look for $80, $85 rents, and therefore is going to be an attractive alternative at a higher rent than maybe they thought.
And you think about what Pfizer did to the building. They souped that building up.
That's right.
The building systems are incredible. And the fenestration of the building actually gives you a lot of great windowed offices in there. So again, I mean, it's not A+ product. It's not A minus, but it's good.
Let's leave Manhattan for a second. Can we get to the borough, the place that he doesn't know what? Brooklyn. Brooklyn and
I'm
Queens.
going to have to go for a car ride.
No, Brooklyn and Queens, and we said it before because we were mentioning that Josh Musk was on my show the week before, and he has this really beautiful building in Forest Hills, but it's 250,000 square feet. And Mark said, you know what? It's still Forest Hills. It's not Manhattan. How many people? What do you see happening in the boroughs? Do you see any of your tenants that you're representing saying, "I want to go to the boroughs"?
It's two different worlds, and you have the support functions that'll go to the boroughs, but for headquarters locations, JetBlue may choose Queens. I don't know that there's a lot of other corporations that are going to choose
You
Queens.
saw MetLife loved it so much.
Right. To the point, right.
What about Jersey City and Hoboken? You were talking about Weehawken before.
Right.
Jersey City has done very well through all this. There's very little space available, and rents are pretty healthy, getting up into the high 30s, believe it or not. Hoboken, again, no existing product. It's new construction if you're looking at anything big there. Weehawken, UBS recently signed their long-term renewal there and has shored that market up.
And shrunk.
They've downsized
Now, what
somewhat.
happened with you and didn't you do NFL Secaucus?
I did the NBA in Secaucus. Roughly the same amount of space, redesigning, making it a little bit more efficient. Each market is a market unto itself.
Mark, Westchester?
Westchester hasn't, the dial hasn't moved in I don't know how many decades. Still $25 a foot for everything that you want in Westchester.
So with
what can I
inflation,
say?
it's come down.
I'm a Manhattan guy.
Well, what about, Newark?
Well, the
Definitely
Nets
doesn't
like
forget
Newark.
there.
I mean, I'll say, look, Pat's
Newark,
look,
the
it's
market
been
is
fairly
pretty
robust
tight there.
Yeah,
It's not a big market, so
surprisingly, it's been good.
I mean,
Yeah, it's $20 a foot.
But by the way,
$20,
Stanford,
$25 a foot.
Greenwich,
No,
Gold Coast,
It's still happening.
it's all happening.
now wait, Greenwich. I
Yep.
mean, that was at $100 a foot. I mean, what is Greenwich leasing for today? There's a limited supply. Yeah, we have to look at it.
and I think that's why we didn't see any kind of compression that you
Correct.
saw everywhere
That's
else.
exactly
The fact is that market remained relatively firm. But there wasn't a lot of stuff going on. I like to look backwards in time to think about what we're going to see going forward. And if you think about the peak market of '00, the trough market of '03, how fast we got to the peak of '07, right? And where the availabilities went. I mean, it's amazing how, kind of what Bruce said, what we're seeing
We've
right
recovered
now.
so quickly.
Peak to trough was lightning.
And,
Yes.
and you've seen it in the last 3 recessions. It's compressed in the last 3 recessions. In '90, there was a certain, maybe it was 8 to 10 years to come back.
That's right.
In 2000, it might have been 5
I think
to 6
Mark
years.
is right on
And
the
frankly,
mark.
this
This one has
is
been
now compressed to
This
maybe
came
3
back
years, so.
quicker. We had a difficult time, and it really came back. But hopefully, in my 11th season, we'll talk again because on what's going on. I'd like to thank Patrick Murphy, Moshe Sekenik, Mark Boissy, and Bruce Mosler. See you next week.
Thank you.
Major support for these programs is provided by Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, All Nation Renovation, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, M&T Bank. Additional support is provided by AVR Realty Company, LLC, Ackman Ziff Real Estate Group, LLC, Bingham McCutcheon, LLP, Briarwood Organization, Capital One Bank, C.B. Richard Ellis, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, Cushman & Wakefield, Dimes Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, DDG Partners, Eastern Consolidated, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Friedman, LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Genova, Burns and Gian Tomasi, Grubb and Ellis, Investors Savings Bank, Jack Jaffa and Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Newmark Knight Frank, RAL Development Services, The Spandrel Group, LLC, Siami Development, SJP Properties, Site Comply, Sterling and Sterling, Stephen Napolitano, The Wickoff Group, Urban American.